Welcome to Bible Reader Companion. Our Bible reading this week is Luke chapter 24 and Acts chapters 1 through 9. Our memory verse this week is Acts chapter 5 and verse 29, which in the New King James reads, "But Peter and the other apostles answered and said, 'We ought to obey God rather than men.'" We've been looking at the events surrounding this statement, first looking at the second arrest by the apostles that led directly to this statement. Then we looked at the first arrest by the apostles where they had already said whether we ought to obey God or listen to you, you judge, and basically accusing them immediately of saying we've got to listen to God, not you. And then seeing that yesterday that when they were threatened and released, they went and they prayed for boldness and just continued preaching. They didn't stop. So let's look again at the events that lead up to the second arrest, this time beginning in chapter 5 and verse 12. Acts chapter 5, verse 12 of the New King James Version. "And through the hands of the apostles many signs and wonders were done among the people. And they were all with one accord on Solomon's porch. Yet none of the rest dared join them, but the people esteemed them highly. And believers were increasingly added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women. So that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at least the shadow of Peter passing by might fall on some of them. Also a multitude gathered from the surrounding cities to Jerusalem, bringing sick people and those who were tormented by unclean spirits, and they were all healed. Then the high priest rose up, and all those who were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and they were filled with indignation, and laid their hands on the apostles and put them in the common prison. But at night an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them out and said, 'Go stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life.' When they heard that, they entered the temple early in the morning and taught. But the high priest and those with him came and called the council together with all the elders of the children of Israel, and sent to the prison to have them brought. When the officers came and did not find them in the prison, they returned and reported, saying, 'Indeed, we found the prison shut securely and the guards standing outside before the doors. But when we opened them, we found no one inside.' And when the high priest, the captain of the temple, and the chief priests heard these things, they wondered what the outcome would be. So one came and told them, saying, 'Look, the men whom you put in prison are standing in the temple and teaching the people.'" You know, one might ask today, will these men never learn? They've already been arrested once and threatened with not to preach Jesus. What did they do? They went and they prayed for boldness and they kept preaching. So they go out and now they're preaching and they're working miracles, and what happens? They get arrested again and they get thrown into prison. And what happens? They get let out. The angels come and let them out of prison. What do? Do they go run? Do they go hide? No, they were told, you go and you preach. And what did they do? They went and they kept preaching. Nothing was deterring these men, not being threatened, not being thrown in prison repeatedly. They just kept preaching. And the priest was outraged. He was furious. And the whole council was outraged. But it didn't stop these men from preaching. And these are the events that led to what we began with this week, where the apostles stood and boldly said, "Look, we have to obey God, not men. We can't follow your instruction." Over and over again they are arrested. Over and over again they are threatened. And yet what do they keep doing? When you read throughout the book of Acts, no matter what challenges the apostles face, no matter what persecution they face, even when one of their own dies, they continue preaching the gospel. They continue preaching Jesus. That's how important they understood it to be. Do we understand it to be that important? Do we understand that we ought to obey God rather than men, that must be our priority? Peter and the other apostles did. For they said, in Acts chapter 5 and verse 29, Peter and the other apostles answered and said, "We ought to obey God rather than men." Thank you for thinking on these things, and we hope you'll join us again tomorrow.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.